Hey everybody, welcome back to Manufactured Fear, a Century of American Indoctrination. In the last episode, we talked about how America's business leaders, preachers, and politicians built a new religion around the market. This time I want to talk about what happened once that religion moved inside of us and how it rewired the American soul. Because once the gospel of the dollar was everywhere, on billboards and pulpits and classrooms, it stopped needing to be sold, right? People just started believing it. So the idea was simple but seductive. If hard work brings reward, then success proves virtue. And that means failure is moral failure. That logic crawled under the skin. It told people that every setback was personal, every layoff a punishment, every hunger pang a sign that they just hadn't prayed or worked hard enough. So psychologists call that internalized control. The powerful call it stability. It's not that people have no control. We all shape parts of our lives through effort and choice, right? But when a system convinces you that every outcome is personal, even though stacked against you, you stop questioning the system itself. You self-correct. You work harder. You blame yourself instead of the machinery that set the terms. The American Dream became the most efficient behavioral program ever written because it made exploitation feel like free will. I mean, you can see it in the stories we still tell, during the Great Depression, when dust storms swallowed the Midwest and factories closed their doors, people didn't burn the banks that took their homes. They blamed themselves for not saving enough. Families piled everything they owned into trucks and drove west chasing work, convinced that the next field or the next season would bring redemption. This behavior is fueled by cognitive dissonance, right? It's less painful to believe I am a failure than it is to accept the shattering realization that the foundation of my society is a lie. That lie protects the psyche from revolution. And when redemption didn't come, people told themselves they'd failed the dream instead of realizing the dream had failed them. But the Depression wasn't just misfortune. It wasn't a streak of bad weather or a roll of bad luck. It was the product of the same faith they'd been taught to worship, an economy built on greed, deregulation, and the blind belief that markets could police themselves. The Dust Bowl wasn't purely natural either. It was the land stripped bare by profit, right? Yet the people who suffered were told it was their own fault, that they'd simply fallen short of the invisible moral test called success. And that's the power of psychological control. You can watch an entire country break its back, trying to climb a ladder that's nailed to the ground. And shame did the rest. Shame polices better than any government ever could. Even the earliest government relief programs were administered through a moral lens, forcing recipients to prove they were the deserving poor and to pass harsh means tests before receiving aid. Like whole towns learned to hide their poverty like a sin. People whispered about who lived off welfare, who wasn't trying, as if morality could be measured in paychecks. And yet, even as that same shame crushed people, it came packaged with hope, the cruelest, softest kind. Keep going, it whispered. One day it'll pay off. Hope became the leash that didn't look like one. It's the same psychological trick that drives a slot machine. You don't need to win every time, just enough to keep believing you might. And the dream works the same way. A few people rise and their stories become national scripture. We call them self-made. We worship them like saints. Think of how we talk about them even now. We repeat their origin stories, rags to riches, started in a garage, slept in his car, like modern parables. We use their names to prove that the system works, not to ask what kind of system needs miracles to seem fair. Meanwhile, everyone else stays busy chasing redemption through productivity. Rest feels like guilt, doubt feels like failure, and community, the very thing that could break the spell, the only engine powerful enough to organize a protest or a union, feels like weakness, a violation of the sacred code of self-reliance. By the middle of the 20th century, the dream wasn't a promise anymore. It was an identity. Parents raised children to be believers. Teachers rewarded obedience. The measure of a life wasn't joy or decency, it was output. That's why when the factory closed or the farm failed or the bills piled up, people didn't riot. They prayed. They hustled. They told themselves that they just hadn't worked hard enough. That's the psychology of the dream. It turns oppression inward, right, until you mistake your cage for ambition. And here's the genius of it. The dream doesn't care whether you succeed or not. The system wins either way. If you fail, you blame yourself. If you succeed, you defend the system that made it possible. Either way, power stays where it is. And when a few voices tried to question it, when labor unions, socialists, and New Deal reformers said, wait, maybe it's not your fault, they were met with a vicious ideological counterattack. They were labeled dangerous, un-American. The dream had become sacred, and to doubt it was heresy. That's how indoctrination evolves. First, it frightens you into obedience, then it flatters you into complicity. And by the time you realize what's happened, the voice of power sounds exactly like your own, right? So if you've enjoyed this, I want to keep going. Hit that follow button for me, and stay tuned for part 4 of Manufactured Fear, Fear Rebranded, where we'll step into the McCarthy era and watch fear turn into spectacle. All right, you guys have a great Saturday. Bye.